Bashru. X1 utters verbally, says, phonates, speaks, or vocally makes sound X2. Badna. X1 is a banana or plantain, fruit or plant of species or breed X2. Bajri. X1 is sad, depressed, dejected, unhappy, or feels sorrow or grief about X2, abstraction. Bajra. X1 runs on surface X2 using limbs X3 with gait X4. Bakfu. X1 is a bundle, package, cluster, clump, pack, shape or form containing X2 held together by X3. Bakni. X1 is a cow, cattle, kine, ox, bull, steer, or calf or beef producer or bovine of species or breed X2. Bakri. X1 is a quantity of, contains, or is made of chalk from source X2 in form X3. Baktu. X1 is a bucket, pail, can, or deep, solid, wide-top container of contents X2 made of material X3. Bulgy. X1 is a bulb, body part of plant or species X2, metaphor for rounded or bulgy. Balni. X1 is a balcony, overhang, ledge, or shelf of building or structure X2. Bolre. X1 is a blade of tool or weapon X2. Bolvi. X1 is in the future of, later than, or after X2 in time sequence. X1 is latter, X2 is former. Banshu. X1 exceeds, is beyond limit or boundary X2 from X3 in property or amount X4, ka or ni. Bandhu. X1 event defends or protects X2 object or state from threat or peril or potential X3 event. Banfi. X1 is an amphibian of species or breed X2. Bangu. X1 is a or the language or dialect used by X2 to express or communicate X3, siho or duhu, not quote. Bunli. X1 is great or grand in property X2, ka, by standard X3. Banro. X1 grows or expands in increasing development to size or into form X2 from X3. Bancha. X1 is a bank owned by or in banking system X2 for banking functions X3 event. Banzu. X1 object suffices or is enough or sufficient for purpose X2 under conditions X3. Bapli. X1 force ka forces or compels event X2 to occur. X1 determines property X2 to manifest. Barda. X1 is big or large in property or dimensions X2 ka as compared with standard or norm X3. Bargu. X1 arches or curves over or around X2 and is made of X3. X1 is an arch over or around X2 of material X3. Barja. X1 is a tavern, bar, or pub serving X2 to audience or patrons X3. Barna. X1 is a mark or spot on X2 of material X3. Bartu. X1 is on the outside of X2. X1 is exterior to X2. Basna. X1 emphasizes, accentuates, or gives emphasis, stress, or accent to X2 by action X3. Basti. X1 replaces or substitutes for or instead of X2 in circumstance X3. X1 is a replacement or substitute. Bachi. X1 bites or pinches X2 on or at specific locus X3 with X4. Batke. X1 is a button, knob, or handle on or for item X2 with purpose X3 made of material X4. Bavmi. X1 is a quantity of barley, grain, of species or strain X2. Bakso. X1 reflects Malay Indonesian common language or culture and aspect X2. Bebna. X1 is foolish or silly, an event or action or property, folly, ka X2. X1 is a boob. Bemro. X1 reflects North American culture, nationality, or geography and aspect X2. Bende. X1 is a crew, team, gang, squad, or band of persons X2 directed or led by X3 organized for purpose X4. Bengal. X1 reflects Bengali or Bangladesh culture or nationality or language and aspect X2. Benji. X1 transfers, sends, or transmits X2 to receiver X3 from transmitter origin X4 via means or medium X5. Bersa. X1 is a son of mother or father or parents X2, not necessarily biological. Berti. X1 is to the north or northern side, right-hand rule pole, of X2 according to frame of reference X3. Besna. X1 is a or the brain, body part of X2, metaphor for intelligence or mental control. Betfu. X1 is a or the abdomen, belly, or lower trunk, body part of X2, metaphor for midsection. Betri. X1 is a tragedy or disaster or is tragic for X2. Bevri. X1 carries, hauls, bears, or transports cargo X2 to X3 from X4 over path X5. X1 is a carrier or porter. Biju. X1 is a bead or pebble, shape or form, of material X2. Bifsha. X1 is a bee, wasp, or hornet of species or breed X2. Bikla. X1 whips, lashes, or snaps, a sudden, violent motion. Bilga. X1 is bound or obliged to, or has the duty to do or be X2 in or by standard or agreement X3. X1 must do X2. Bilma. X1 is ill, sick, or diseased with symptoms X2 from disease X3. Bilni. X1 is military, regimented, or is strongly organized or prepared by system X2 for purpose X3. Bindo. X1 reflects Indonesian culture, nationality, or language in aspect X2. Binra. X1 insures or indemnifies X2 person against peril X3 event, providing benefits X4 event. Binho. X1 becomes, changes, converts, or transforms into X2 under conditions X3. Birja. X1 is made of, contains, or is an amount of beer, ale, or brew brewed from X2. Birka. X1 is a or the arm, body part of X2, metaphor for branch with strength. Birti. X1 is certain, sure, positive, or convinced that X2 is true. Beastly. X1 is a quantity of, or is made of, or contains ice, frozen crystal, of composition or material X2. Bitmu. X1 is a wall or fence separating X2 and X3, unordered, of or in structure X4. Blobby. X1 is white or very light colored, color adjective. Blashi. X1 is a quantity of, or is made of, or contains glass of composition including X2. Blanu. X1 is blue, color adjective. Bliku. X1 is a block, three-dimensional shape or form of material X2, surfaces or sides X3. Bloti. X1 is a boat, ship, or vessel vehicle for carrying X2 propelled by X3. Bolshi. X1 is a ball, sphere, orb, or globe, shape or form of material X2. X1 is a spherical object made of X2. Bongu. X1 is a or the bone or ivory body part performing function X2 in body of X3, metaphor for calcium. Botpi. X1 is a bottle, jar, urn, flask, or closable container for X2 made of material X3 with lid X4. Bochfo. X1 is a sheet, foil, or blanket, two-dimensional shape or form flexible in 3 dimensions of material X2. Bochna. X1 is a wave periodic pattern in medium X2, waveform X3, wavelength X4, frequency X5. Brody. X1 is an enemy, opponent, adversary, or foe of X2 and struggle X3. Bratu. X1 is hail, sleet, freezing rain, or solid precipitation of material or composition including X2. Brazo. X1 reflects Brazilian culture, nationality, or language in aspect X2. Ready. X1 is ready or prepared for X2 event. Ready. X1 text is a predicate relationship with relation X2 among arguments, sequence, or set X3. Briefe. X1 is a breeze, wind, or gale from direction X2 with speed X3. X1 blows from X2. Briju. X1 is an office, bureau, or workplace of worker X2 at location X3. Brito. X1 reflects British or United Kingdom culture or nationality in aspect X2. Broda. First assignable variable predicate, context determines place structure. Broda, second assignable variable predicate. Brody, third assignable variable predicate. Brodo, fourth assignable variable predicate. Brodu, fifth assignable variable predicate. Bruna. X1 is brother of or fraternal to X2 by bond, tie, standard, or parents X3, not necessarily biological. Bujo. X1 pertains to the Buddhist culture, religion, or ethos in aspect X2. Bukbu. X1 is an amount of cloth or fabric of type or material X2. Boomru. X1 is foggy, misty, or covered by a fog, mist, or vapor of liquid X2. Bunda. X1 is X2, default 1, local weight units, non-metric, standard X3, subunits, for instance, ounces, X4. Bunra. X1 is brown or tan, color adjective. Burshu. X1 is a brush for purpose X2 event with bristles X3. Burna. X1 is embarrassed, disconcerted, flustered, or ill at ease about or under conditions X2. Abstraction.